Brothers and sisters, what I'm about to share with you today isn't just another story from the war-torn roads of Syria. This is a testimony that will shake the very foundations of what you believe is possible when heaven touches earth. My name is Khalil Mansour. I'm 47 years old, and I've been driving these dangerous roads for over 20 years. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened on that scorching afternoon in July, when death came hunting for me and found something else entirely. I wasn't always a believer. In fact, for most of my life, I considered myself a cultural Christian at best, someone who wore a cross around his neck more out of tradition than conviction. My grandmother used to pray over me every night when I was a child, whispering ancient Aramaic prayers that I never understood, anointing my forehead with oil that smelled like frankincense and myrrh. I tolerated it because I loved her, but deep down, I thought it was all superstition. The roads had made me hard, practical. In a place where survival depended on your wits and your ability to navigate between warring factions, prayer seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. But 2 months before that fateful day, something began stirring in my spirit. It started with dreams, vivid, overwhelming dreams that would wake me at exactly 3:33 a.m., drenched in sweat, with words echoing in my mind that I didn't recognize. The dreams always featured the same elements: a narrow mountain road, the smell of burning diesel, and a voice, not audible, but felt deep in my chest, saying, "Be ready, my son. Your hour of testing approaches, but it will become your hour of glory." I tried to dismiss these dreams as stress from the increasingly dangerous deliveries I was making. The route between Aleppo and Damascus had become a death trap, with checkpoints controlled by different factions, bandits hiding in the mountains, and the constant threat of airstrikes. But the dreams intensified. Each night, the voice became clearer, more urgent. "The enemy comes to destroy, but I come to save. Trust in me when your eyes see no way out." On July 15th, I received a call that would change everything. It came at dawn, as I was drinking my morning coffee and reading the shipping manifest for what I thought would be a routine delivery of medical supplies to a clinic in Damascus. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Miriam Khoury, a Christian doctor I had never met, but whose reputation for treating anyone, regardless of religion or political affiliation, was legendary throughout Syria. "Khalil," she said, and her voice carried a weight that made my coffee cup tremble in my hands. "I know this is unusual, but I had a dream about you last night, a very specific dream. In it, I saw you driving a blue truck. You do drive a blue truck, don't you?" My throat went dry. I did indeed drive a blue Volvo truck, though I had never told her this detail. "In my dream," she continued, "I saw you surrounded by men with weapons, but above you was a light so bright it turned their hatred into weeping. I believe God wants to use you today, but I also believe your life will be in great danger. I'm calling to ask if you would consider taking a different route." But here's what she didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone. In my dreams the night before, I had seen her face. A woman with kind eyes and graying hair, wearing a white coat stained with blood and tears, standing in what looked like a makeshift clinic. In the dream, she had handed me something, a small wooden cross that seemed to pulse with warmth, and said, "This is your armor today." When she mentioned her dream about the light, every hair on my body stood up. This wasn't coincidence. This was something far bigger than both of us. I felt a pull in my chest, as if an invisible rope was drawing me towards something I couldn't see but had to follow. "Doctor," I heard myself saying, "I think I need to take that route. I think this is exactly where I'm supposed to be today." The preparation for that journey felt different from any other. Usually I would check my cargo, fill up with fuel, and hit the road without much thought. But that morning, I found myself doing things I had never done before. I knelt beside my truck, actually knelt on the hot asphalt, and prayed for the first time in probably 15 years. I didn't know the right words, so I just spoke from my heart. "God, if you're really there, if these dreams mean something, please protect me today. Not because I deserve it, but because maybe you have something you want to show the world through this." As I climbed into the cab, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Sitting on my dashboard, where I was certain nothing had been before, was a small wooden cross. It was weathered, hand-carved, and when I picked it up, it was warm to the touch, not from the sun, but with a warmth that seemed to come from within. This was the exact cross from my dream. Exactly. Every detail, every imperfection in the wood, every worn edge. I clutched it so tightly that it left marks on my palm. The journey began normally enough. The sun was already brutal at 8 a.m., turning the metal of my truck into a furnace. The first few checkpoints went smoothly. Soldiers who recognized me, a few jokes about the heat, the usual bribes paid with cigarettes and small cash. But as I climbed into the mountains between Homs and Damascus, the atmosphere began to change. The air itself felt thick, oppressive, like breathing through wet wool. Around noon, I started noticing the signs. Cars that had been following me for too long, motorcycles that appeared and disappeared in my mirrors, and then I saw it. A roadblock ahead that I knew wasn't supposed to be there. My regular contact in this area, a government soldier named Amjad, had specifically told me this stretch would be clear. But there it was. Vehicles parked across the narrow mountain road, armed men standing in positions that could only mean one thing. This was an ambush. My first instinct was to brake hard and try to reverse, but a quick glance in my mirror showed that retreat was no longer an option. 2 pickup trucks had materialized behind me, their beds filled with armed men whose faces were covered with scarves. I was trapped on a mountain road with a 1,000-foot drop on one side and a sheer cliff on the other. The mathematical reality was simple. I was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. As I approached the roadblock, I could see the men clearly now. There were at least 12 of them carrying assault rifles and wearing the mixed uniforms and civilian clothes that marked them as one of the more brutal militia groups. Their leader, a tall man with a black beard and eyes like chips of obsidian, stepped forward with the confident swagger of someone who had done this many times before. But here's what I want you to understand. At that moment, when death was walking toward my truck with casual certainty, I felt something I had never experienced before. Instead of the terror I expected, a profound peace settled over me. It wasn't the peace of resignation. It was the peace of knowing that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, at exactly the right time, for exactly the right purpose. The leader reached my window and motioned for me to roll it down. When I did, the heat hit me like a slap, but underneath it was something else, a smell that shouldn't have been there. It was the scent of frankincense and myrrh, the same smell from my grandmother's prayers all those years ago. "Get out," he commanded in Arabic, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. As I climbed down from the cab, the wooden cross still clutched in my left hand, I could hear my heart beating in my ears. But underneath that natural fear, I could hear something else, a whisper that seemed to come from the very air around me. "Be still and know that I am God." The leader began speaking, but I want to tell you what I was seeing beyond his words. As he talked about my cargo, about the tribute I would need to pay to pass through their territory, about how Christian drivers weren't welcome on this road, I was watching something extraordinary happen in the spiritual realm. It's hard to describe if you've never experienced it, but it was as if a veil was being lifted from my eyes. I could see that we weren't alone on that mountain road. Standing among the armed men, invisible to them but crystal clear to me, were figures of light. Not angels as you might imagine them from church paintings. These were beings of such pure radiance that looking directly at them made my eyes water. But more than that, I could see the spiritual condition of each man present. Over some of them hung shadows so dark they seemed to absorb light, but over others, including the leader, I could see something different. Chains. Spiritual chains that bound them, but chains that looked brittle, as if they were waiting for the right word, the right moment, to shatter completely. "You have a choice," the leader was saying, and I realized I had been so focused on the spiritual realm that I had missed part of his speech. "You can empty your truck and pay us what we ask, or you can die here and we'll take everything anyway. What's your answer, Christian?" The way he spat the word Christian told me everything I needed to know about his intentions. This wasn't just a robbery, this was persecution, hatred boiling over into violence. In his eyes I could see the same spirit that had driven men to crucify Christ, to stone Stephen, to feed believers to lions. But I could also see something else, a deep, aching emptiness that all the violence in the world could never fill. That's when I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of pleading for my life or trying to negotiate, I heard myself saying, "Brother, before we talk about my cargo, can I tell you about a dream I had last night?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. His hand tightened on his rifle, but curiosity flickered in his eyes. "What kind of dream?" "I dreamed about you," I said. and the words came out with such conviction that I surprised myself. I dreamed about a man with a black beard and eyes full of pain, standing on a mountain road, waiting for something he didn't even know he was looking for. The change in his expression was immediate. The calculated cruelty faltered, replaced by something raw and unguarded. "How could you know?" he started, then caught himself. "You're lying. Christians are all liars." But I could see that my words had hit their mark. I continued, guided by an inner voice that was definitely not my own. "In my dream, I saw you as a child, sitting in your mother's lap while she sang to you. I saw you learning to pray, believing that God heard every word. I saw the day when violence and hatred convinced you that prayer was pointless, that only force mattered in this world." His face had gone pale beneath his tan. Behind him, his men were growing restless, confused by this unexpected turn in what should have been a simple robbery. But their leader was transfixed, staring at me as if I had just spoken his deepest secrets out loud. "How can you know these things?" he whispered, and for the first time his voice carried uncertainty instead of command. "Because," I said, holding up the wooden cross, "the same God who loved you as a child still loves you now. And he sent me here today not to be your victim, but to remind you who you really are." What happened next defies everything I thought I knew about human nature. This hardened militia leader, this man whose hands had undoubtedly shed blood, whose presence commanded fear from seasoned fighters, began to weep. Not the controlled tears of manipulation, but the deep, body-shaking sobs of a soul that had been carrying unbearable weight for too long. The wooden cross in my hand had begun to grow warm, not hot enough to burn, but with a gentle heat that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. And as it warmed, something extraordinary began to happen in the visible realm. A light began to emanate from the cross itself, starting as a faint glow but growing steadily brighter. It wasn't the harsh light of the desert sun. It was soft, golden, warm like honey, but bright like a star. The men around us began to notice. First one, then another, pointing at the light with expressions of wonder and fear. The light continued to grow, expanding beyond the cross, to envelop my entire hand, then my arm, then my whole body. But it wasn't emanating from me. I was simply the vessel through which something infinitely greater was choosing to manifest. Their leader fell to his knees, right there on the asphalt, his rifle clattering to the ground beside him. "Forgive me," he sobbed, and the words came out in Arabic, then Kurdish, then broken English, as if his broken heart was speaking in every language he had ever known. "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me." But the miracle was just beginning. As the light continued to expand, I watched it wash over each armed man like a gentle wave, and wherever it touched, transformation followed. Weapons fell from hands suddenly too heavy to hold them. Faces twisted with years of hatred began to soften. Eyes that had seen too much death began to weep tears that looked like they were washing away more than just dust and sweat. One by one, every single one of them fell to their knees, not in surrender to a human enemy, but in recognition of a divine presence they could no longer deny. The mountain road had become a sanctuary, the desert sun a cathedral ceiling, the asphalt beneath our knees a holy altar. But God wasn't finished. As we knelt there together, former enemies united in wonder, I began to hear singing. At first I thought it was coming from one of the men, but as I listened more carefully, I realized it was coming from everywhere and nowhere, filling the air around us with melodies so beautiful they made my chest ache with longing. It was worship music, but not any human voice. This was the sound of heaven itself, breaking through into our broken world. The leader, whose name I would later learn was Ahmad, looked up at me with eyes completely transformed. The hatred was gone, replaced by something I can only describe as holy wonder. "What is happening to us?" he asked, and his voice was completely different, soft, vulnerable, like a child asking his father about thunder. "We're being loved," I said, and as the words left my mouth, I knew with absolute certainty that they were true. "We're being shown who we really are, underneath all the fear and pain and anger. We're being reminded that we were created for something far more beautiful than this." That's when Ahmad did something that still gives me chills when I remember it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn photograph. It was a picture of a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, smiling at the camera with gap-toothed innocence. "This is who I used to be," he said, his voice breaking. "Before the war, before I learned to hate, before I forgot how to pray, this is who I was when I still believed God heard me. He never stopped hearing you, I said, and again the words came from somewhere deeper than my own understanding. Every angry prayer, every cry for justice, every moment when you wondered if he had abandoned you, he heard it all. And he loves you now exactly as much as he loved that little boy in the picture. The light around us began to intensify even further, and suddenly I could see something that took my breath away. There, standing among us on that desert road, was a figure so radiant that my natural eyes couldn't focus on him clearly, but my spirit knew immediately who it was. This was the Prince of Peace himself, walking among us as naturally as if he had been part of our group from the beginning. He moved from man to man, and wherever he touched, healing followed. Not just spiritual healing, though that was profound, but physical healing as well. Omar, one of Ahmad's men, had been carrying shrapnel in his left leg from an explosion months earlier. When the figure in light touched his leg, Omar cried out and fell backward, then stood up in wonder, taking steps without the limp that had defined his walk for so long. Samir, another fighter, had been deaf in his right ear since childhood. When those radiant hands touched his head, he gasped and began weeping, hearing birdsong for the first time in his life with perfect clarity. "I can hear the wind in the rocks," he sobbed. "I can hear everything." But the most profound healing was happening in the realm of the heart. I watched as 20 years of accumulated bitterness and rage simply melted away from Ahmad's face. The lines of tension around his eyes disappeared. His shoulders, which had been permanently hunched with the weight of command and violence, relaxed for the first time in years. "I remember now," he whispered, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I remember what it felt like to believe that love was stronger than hate. I remember when my mother taught me that every person was precious to God, no matter what they believed or where they came from." The transformation was so complete, so immediate, that if I hadn't witnessed it myself, I would never have believed such a thing was possible. These men who had approached my truck with murder in their hearts were now embracing each other, asking forgiveness for years of accumulated cruelties, praying together in languages that had been used as weapons of division just moments before. But God wasn't finished showing us his power. As we continued to kneel there in worship and wonder, I began to notice changes in the natural world around us. The desert heat, which had been oppressive and draining, became pleasant and refreshing. A breeze began to blow that carried scents of jasmine and roses, though we were miles from any garden. And then, impossibly in the middle of the desert, in the height of summer, it began to rain. Not the harsh, driving rain of a storm, but a gentle, warm rain that felt like liquid love falling from heaven. Each drop that touched my skin seemed to carry with it a whisper of divine affection. The parched earth around us began to bloom, not metaphorically but literally. Tiny flowers began pushing up through cracks in the asphalt. Desert plants that had been dormant suddenly burst into colorful bloom, and the air filled with the scent of new life. Ahmad stood up slowly, his face turned toward the sky, letting the impossible rain wash over him. "I haven't felt clean in 10 years, he said, and I could see that he meant it in every possible sense. "Not since the first time I killed a man, but this rain, it's washing away more than dirt." That's when he made a decision that would send shockwaves through the entire region. He turned to his men and announced, "We're done, all of it. The fighting, the roadblocks, the hatred, all of it ends today. We're going home to ask our families to forgive us. We're going to find the imam and the priest and tell them what we saw here. We're going to spend the rest of our lives proving that love really is stronger than hate." The response from his men was immediate and unanimous. These hardened fighters, these men who had known nothing but violence for years, began stripping off their ammunition belts and laying down their weapons right there on the road. It was the most beautiful act of surrender I have ever witnessed. Not surrender to a human enemy, but surrender to a love so profound it made everything else seem like shadows. But there was more. Ahmad approached my truck and began helping me check my cargo, not to steal from it, but to ensure that nothing had been damaged during our encounter. When he discovered that I was carrying medical supplies for a Christian clinic in Damascus, his eyes filled with tears again. "My daughter," he said quietly. "She's been sick for months. The doctors in our area can't help her, but I've heard about the Christian clinic in Damascus. They say the doctor there performs miracles." The coincidence was too perfect to be accidental. "Dr. Miriam Khoury?" I asked. His face lit up with recognition and hope. "Yes, that's her name, but we could never go there. Christians and Muslims, you know. The suspicion, the fear." "Brother," I said, placing my hand on his shoulder, I think God arranged this whole encounter just so you could know that Dr. Khoury will welcome your daughter with love. And I think he wants me to personally escort you there to make sure there are no misunderstandings. What happened next was like something from the Book of Acts. Ahmad not only accepted my offer, but he insisted that his entire group accompany us to Damascus as protectors rather than threats. These men who had been preparing to rob and possibly kill me became my guardians, my brothers, my partners, in a mission that none of us fully understood, but all of us knew was sacred. The journey to Damascus took on the character of a pilgrimage. We traveled in convoy, my blue truck in the lead, followed by 3 vehicles full of former militants who were now singing worship songs in Arabic, Kurdish, and broken English. At every checkpoint, the guards were so bewildered by the sight of this unlikely group that they simply waved us through without questions. But the real miracle was still to come. When we arrived at Dr. Khoury's clinic, she took one look at our group and began weeping. "I saw this in my dream," she said. "I saw the blue truck arriving with an escort of men who had laid down their weapons for love. I saw them carrying a sick child, and I saw that child being healed not just in body but in spirit. Ahmad's daughter Amira was indeed gravely ill. The diagnosis was lymphoma, and the local doctors had given her only weeks to live. But when Dr. Khoury examined her, with all of us gathered around praying in our various languages and traditions, something extraordinary happened. The child's fever broke instantly. Color returned to her pale cheeks. Her labored breathing became easy and natural. "The tumors," Dr. Khoury whispered after completing her examination, "they're gone. Completely gone. In 20 years of medicine, I've never seen anything like this." Little Amira sat up in bed and looked around at all the faces surrounding her, Christian and Muslim, Arab and Kurdish, former enemies united in wonder and joy. "Baba," she said to her father, using the Arabic word for daddy, "I had the most beautiful dream while I was sleeping. I dreamed that Jesus and Muhammad were walking together in a garden, and they were the best of friends. They told me that all their children should be friends too." The impact of that moment rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. Word of the miracle began to spread through Damascus, then throughout Syria, then across the entire Middle East. The story of the truck driver and the militant leader who found God together on a mountain road became legend. The clinic where the healing took place became a pilgrimage site for people of all faiths. But the most profound changes were personal and intimate. Ahmad, true to his word, returned to his village and publicly renounced violence. He began working with local religious leaders, both Muslim and Christian, to establish reconciliation programs. His men, inspired by his example, followed suit. Within 6 months, their former stronghold had been transformed from a center of militancy into a model of interfaith cooperation. Dr. Khoury's clinic expanded into a network of healing centers that explicitly welcomed people of all backgrounds. The wooden cross that had started it all, the cross that had appeared on my dashboard and glowed with divine light, was kept in a place of honor at the main clinic, where it continued to be associated with unexplained healings and spiritual transformations. And me. I continued driving my routes through Syria, but now as more than just a trucker. I became a bridge builder, a storyteller, a living witness to the power of divine love to transform even the most hopeless situations. Every checkpoint became an opportunity to share what I had seen. Every delivery became a chance to carry not just cargo, but hope. 6 months after our encounter on the mountain road, Ahmad and I traveled together to Jerusalem. We went as pilgrimage partners, as brothers, as living proof that the dividing walls of hostility really can be broken down. We prayed together at the Western Wall and at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We walked the Via Dolorosa and visited the Dome of the Rock. At every sacred site, people were amazed to see a Christian trucker and a former Muslim militant worshipping side by side, their friendship deeper than blood, their unity a testimony to transformation. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when we returned to the exact spot on the mountain road where our encounter had taken place. We brought our families, my wife and children, Ahmad's wife, and now healthy daughter Amira. We spread blankets on the asphalt and shared a feast that included foods from both our traditions. As the sun set over the Syrian mountains, painting the sky in colors that reminded me of the light I had seen that miraculous day, we told our children the story of how enemies had become brothers through the power of divine love. Little Amira, now completely healthy and glowing with life, stood up during our meal, and began to sing, a song she said the angels had taught her in her dreams. Her voice was clear and sweet, and as she sang, the same impossible flowers began blooming again in the cracks of the asphalt. The same warm rain began to fall from a cloudless sky. The same presence that had transformed us all those months ago made itself known again, as if to remind us that the love we had experienced wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing reality available to anyone with eyes to see and hearts to receive. "Uncle Khalil," Amira said when she finished singing, addressing me with the title of respect that Syrian children use for trusted family friends, "the angels told me something else. They said that everyone who hears this story will have a chance to choose. They can choose to believe that hate is stronger than love, or they can choose to believe what we experienced that day. They said the same power that changed Baba's heart is waiting to change theirs too." Now let me ask you something, my friend, my brother, my sister, who is listening to this testimony. What is your choice? I've told you what I saw with my own eyes, what I experienced with my own heart, what I witnessed with my own spirit. I've shared with you a story that defies every cynical explanation, that challenges every assumption about what's possible in our broken world. The same God who met us on that Syrian mountain road is present with you right now, wherever you are listening to these words. The same light that transformed a group of armed militants into worshipping brothers is ready to shine into whatever darkness you're carrying. The same love that healed a dying child and reconciled ancient enemies is available to heal your wounds and reconcile your broken relationships. But here's what I want you to understand. This isn't just a feel-good story about remarkable coincidences and psychological transformations. This is a testimony about the active, immediate, miraculous intervention of a God who is not distant or disinterested, but intimately involved in the details of human life. This is proof that the age of miracles didn't end with the apostles, that divine love is still breaking into our world in ways that defy explanation but demand response. As I speak these words to you, I'm holding that same wooden cross that appeared on my dashboard and glowed with heavenly light. And I want you to know that it's warm again, not from my body heat, not from the temperature of the room, but with that same divine warmth that I felt on the mountain road. It's as if God is confirming even now that every word I've spoken is true, that every miracle I've described really happened, that the same power that transformed that encounter is present and available right now. The question is, what will you do with this testimony? Will you dismiss it as coincidence, as psychological manipulation, as religious fantasy? Or will you allow it to open your heart to possibilities you may have never considered? Will you remain safely skeptical? Or will you take the risk of believing that love really is stronger than hate, that forgiveness really can break the chains of bitterness, that divine intervention really is possible in your own life? I'm not asking you to believe in me. I'm asking you to believe in the God who met me on that mountain road, who transformed enemies into brothers, who healed a dying child, who continues to work miracles in the lives of ordinary people who are willing to trust him. I'm asking you to consider that the same love that changed Ahmad's heart and saved my life is reaching out to you right now, in this very moment. Ahmad often says that our encounter on the mountain road was like a door opening between heaven and earth, and that once you've walked through that door, you can never again be satisfied with anything less than divine love. I know what he means. Since that day, I've experienced a peace that has nothing to do with my circumstances, a joy that doesn't depend on external conditions, a love that grows stronger rather than weaker when it's tested by difficulty. And I've seen that same transformation in countless others who have heard our story and chosen to believe. I've watched hardened hearts melt, broken relationships heal, impossible situations resolve, physical illnesses disappear, financial problems solve themselves in miraculous ways, and spiritual darkness give way to overwhelming light. Just last month, I received a letter from a woman in Germany who heard our testimony through a friend. She wrote that she had been planning to end her own life, that despair had convinced her that hope was impossible, that love was a fairy tale. But something about our story reached into her darkness and lit a candle of possibility. She decided to pray one more time, to give God one more chance to prove his love. That night, she had a dream, remarkably similar to the ones that had prepared me for my encounter with Ahmad. She saw herself surrounded by the same golden light, heard the same voice of infinite love, felt the same divine warmth that had transformed our mountain road into holy ground. When she woke up, every trace of her depression was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and hope so strong that she immediately began reaching out to help other people who were struggling with suicidal thoughts. She now runs a crisis intervention program that has saved hundreds of lives. Her approach is simple. She tells people what happened to her, what happened to us, what continues to happen when human desperation meets divine love. She doesn't argue theology or quote scripture. She simply shares the reality of transformation and lets that truth work its own miracle in receptive hearts. This is what I want you to understand. The story I've shared with you isn't just about something that happened once, in one place, to one group of people. It's about something that's happening constantly everywhere, whenever human hearts open themselves to divine love. It's about a reality that's available to you right now, regardless of your past, regardless of your pain, regardless of how impossible your situation might seem. But you have to choose. Love doesn't force itself on anyone. Grace doesn't override free will. The same God who could have compelled Ahmad to lay down his weapons instead waited until hatred gave way to wonder, until pride gave way to humility, until fear gave way to faith. He waits for us all the same way, with infinite patience, infinite love, infinite hope, that we will choose to receive what he is so eager to give. As I bring this testimony to a close, I want to pray with you and for you. Whether you're listening alone in your car, in your home, walking somewhere, or gathered with others, I want you to know that the same presence that met us on that Syrian mountain road is with you right now. The same love that transformed enemies into brothers is reaching out to transform whatever brokenness you're carrying. If you're willing, I invite you to close your eyes and simply open your heart to whatever God wants to do in this moment. Don't worry about having the right words or the right theology. Don't worry about whether you're worthy or whether you've made too many mistakes. Just be honest about where you are and be open to where love wants to take you. God of the mountain road, God of impossible encounters, God of divine light that transforms darkness into radiance, I bring before you every person who has heard this testimony. I ask that the same miraculous love that met us in our moment of greatest danger would meet them in their moment of greatest need. For those who are facing enemies, whether external threats or internal battles, show them that your love is stronger than any force arrayed against them. For those who are sick in body, mind, or spirit, release your healing power into every cell, every thought, every emotion that needs restoration. For those who have lost hope, rekindle the flame of divine possibility in their hearts. For those who have been carrying hatred, bitterness, or unforgiveness, pour out the same transforming love that melted Ahmad's heart and turned him from enemy to brother. For those who feel distant from you, bridge every gap with your presence. For those who doubt your existence, make yourself known in ways so undeniable that skepticism gives way to wonder, just as it did on that desert road. I pray specifically for miraculous encounters, that you would arrange divine appointments, send earth angels, speak through dreams and visions, and manifest your presence in whatever way each person most needs to experience. Let this be their moment, their mountain road, their encounter with the impossible love that changes everything. And for those who are ready to surrender, who are tired of trying to manage their lives through human strength alone, I pray that you would receive their humble offering of themselves and fill them with the same peace, joy, and purpose that has sustained me since that miraculous day. Father, let the same flowers that bloomed in the desert bloom in their hearts. Let the same rain that fell from clear skies wash away every stain of shame and regret. Let the same light that surrounded us surround them now, driving away every shadow, illuminating every path, revealing your face of love that never changes, never fails, never gives up. In the name of Jesus, who walked with us on that road, who healed Ahmad's daughter, who continues to work miracles in the lives of ordinary people who dare to believe, in his precious and powerful name, I release this prayer and this blessing over every life that has been touched by this testimony. If you felt something move in your heart during this prayer, if you sensed a presence, if hope stirred within you, if tears came to your eyes, if you experienced any touch of divine love, then you have had your own encounter with the God of the mountain road. Hold on to that feeling, nurture it, let it grow. That was not your imagination or emotional manipulation. That was the beginning of your own transformation story. And please, don't let this be the end. Find others who believe in the power of divine love. Share your own story of how this testimony touched you. Begin looking for ways to be a bridge builder, a peacemaker, a bearer of hope in your own sphere of influence. The same God who used a truck driver and a former militant to demonstrate his love wants to use you too. Remember Ahmad's daughter, little Amira, singing her angel-taught song about choosing between love and hate. Remember that your choice matters, not just for your own life, but for everyone whose life you touch. Choose love. Choose forgiveness. Choose hope. Choose to believe that the same God who met us on a Syrian mountain road is walking with you on whatever road you're traveling.